seriously energetic day from, you know, and it's always a blessing to have him with us. There's so many things to say about Dr. Maulana Karenga. He's the chair and professor of the Department of Black Studies at California State University at Long Beach, creator of Kwanzaa and the Nguzo Saba, author of several books and scholarly articles, including Introduction to Black Studies. He's the executive director of the Institute of Pan-African Studies. And just a few of the many things that we can say about Dr. Karenga. He's an inspiration to myself and to all of the members of NACO all over the country. And we always, you know, just happy to always have him here in our midst. And want you to put your hands together and welcome one of the great scholars and thinkers of our race, Dr. Maulana Karenga.
We bear witness as an African people that as our beginning was great and good, so shall our development throughout eternity be, if we dare speak truth, do justice, and walk in the way of righteousness. We are here tonight to honor one of the greatest persons of our time, a man of history, a soldier. You know what? Y'all got to get into this, you know? Every time I come to New York, I have to just help. What happens in New York when I leave? What happens? It's just like when people were, you know, like talking and y'all just, come on, let's get into this. You know what I mean? This is America. You know what I mean? Y'all came out here to enjoy yourself.
That's right.
Again, I always have to tell nationalists, you don't enjoy yourself when you posture and think that you're not supposed to enjoy yourself, and that if you show any emotion, you're being overly emotional. That might sound right somewhere in Europe, but it ain't supposed to sound right here. You know what I mean? We're supposed to feel what we do, and what we engage in, we have to feel it, or we shouldn't even be into it.
That's right.
So let me start off and say, welcome, you found your family, the peaceful place, and we wish for you blessings without number and all good things without end. We are, as I said, gathered here tonight to honor one of the greatest persons of our time, a man of history, a soldier who died on the battlefield. It's always we're going to have to give him us a different thing here. It's too high up here and too low down here, but okay, what are we going to do? Okay. Just trying to loosen y'all up. Let you know it's all right to enjoy yourself. I don't know what happened to nationals. They get to talk and struggle so much they don't think they're supposed to laugh and enjoy themselves. But you ever notice Malcolm when he lectured, no matter how serious he got, he would always laugh in his lectures. Have you noticed that? Right. He enjoyed teaching. He enjoyed revealing knowledge. He enjoyed encouraging black people to think about things in different ways. So we're here to honor this soldier who died on the battlefield of African history and culture. A man who gave his life so that we might live more full lives, that we might understand and appreciate our lives more fully. This man, this soldier, this son of Ra is none other than Malcolm X. Right. So we come here to pay homage to Malcolm X. Right. His birthday is 19th May, and this year marks his 67th birthday. So we stop to wonder and honor him. To honor him for what he's achieved and to wonder about the wonderful things he might have achieved. Right. To talk about what wise things he might have taught us if he had lived today. For he was indeed a great seer of deep things, a severe critic of all things negative to human life and development, a fire prophet, man of wisdom, a fire prophet who prophesied our victory in the rising tide of human history. If we would just wake up,
that's it.
clean up, and then stand up. living history. And we do this, number one, learn his lessons. 2, absorb his spirit. 3, to emulate his bold and heroic model. And 4, to honor our ethical obligation to remember those who paved the path down which we now walk and gave their lives so that we could live fuller and more meaningful ones. To raise up Malcolm then and to remember him, I'd like to talk with you about his legacy as an ethical teacher. Malcolm, above all, was an ethical teacher. A lot of times people don't even talk about Malcolm as an ethical teacher. They don't even see Malcolm in ethical terms. No. But Malcolm was a teacher of the good life. A teacher of the good life in freedom, in decency, and dignity. He believed we should be free. We also had to be decent, morally decent ourselves. And that we had to walk in dignity and bear the burden of our awesome history. He was a teacher of human possibility. And he taught that through discipline, dedication, and sacrifice, you could achieve. To discuss Malcolm's ethical teacher, and to discuss him as a moral teacher, I'd like to lecture from a book I'm writing on Malcolm X, which I hope to finish this year. There is no greater legacy that Malcolm has left us than his ethical teaching, his liberation ethics. By a legacy of liberation ethics, I mean a moral path and a process by which a person can not only free and fulfill him or herself, but also contribute meaningfully to the liberation of African people, and through this, the liberation of humanity itself. The practice of an ethics of liberation was for Malcolm a fierce rites of passage. It was a passage from unconscious and mindless self-destruction to self-conscious self-construction. The key category for Malcolm was a category of moral worthiness. I want you to think about that. Moral worthiness. You know, a lot of times black people don't even want to be put to the test. No. Black people say, just love me for what I am. That's not enough. Right? We got to also love you for what you can become. That's right. If all you are is what you are now, you're finished and might as well die. Because that's what death is, the end of development. So Malcolm said, we all must be worthy. And his phrase was that we should be able to stand with dignity and honor before our people and our God. Those are 2 sources. Before our people and our God. Before humanity and history. Before history and heaven. That's a strong statement. A lot of times people don't want to be judged by history, but we got to judge you by what you've done, what you've said, how you've acted, how you related or failed to relate. That's to judge you by that. And then if you are religious and you believe that God judges, then you also should get ready for that. And so we say in us organization, all of us should stand at the end of our lives ready to be judged by history in heaven. We must have what we call standards. That's right. You know, one of the major problems in the black community is become the consistent erosion of standards. That's right. You see, a lot of times black people want to just be left alone to do what they can and do what they want to do anytime they want to do it. You see, they say, I'm like this. Yeah. I don't follow no rules. I live my life the way I want to. Get up when I want to, go where I want to, return home when I want to. Don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me how I should treat my woman or my man. Don't tell me how I should raise my children. Don't tell me how I should act. Let me decide this. What kind of life is that? We are social beings above all. We are defined, as Mbiti said, by who is around us, by the relationships we have. I am because you are, and because you are, therefore I am. We exist, and I exist in the context of that. I'm a person in context. I'm a person in community. I'm not hanging in the air. I'm actually in society. I actually have relations. People call me by different names based on my relationship with them. Husband, friend, soldier, brother. All of these words indicate my responsibility to people. And I must have standards or I dishonor those responsibilities to those people. So standards are moral mirrors. See what I said? Standards are are moral mirrors by which we measure ourselves. I want to say that again. Standards are moral standards are moral mirrors by which we measure ourselves. We look at our standards and we say, how do we measure up? Are we following them? Are we floating through life wild and loose, unable to stand on solid moral ground? We must have standards like the Nguzo Saga. We must have standards like the 7 cardinal virtues of Ma. So Malcolm is concerned about the quality of our life. And he teaches that you can only live a full and meaningful life by living a moral life, by living an engaged life, by living a knowledgeable life. And therefore, Malcolm said, to be very worthy, you must do 3 things. Wake up, clean up, and then stand up. Malcolm X's ethical project is essentially a project of liberation, a struggle which is both a process and a promise of human freedom and fulfillment in history. Listen to that now. Liberation as a process and a promise. It's something you must engage in, but it offers a promise of liberation and a high level of human life. And if you don't get involved in the process, you have no promise. And a lot of times people don't want to engage. Sometimes they're too religious and they keep waiting for somebody to come to save them. They keep hoping they will fly away and have not made arrangements. And Malcolm said, listen to what Malcolm said, talking about the need for struggle. He said, quote, heaven and hell are conditions reflecting one's moral and material conditions here on earth. Did you hear what he said? Heaven and hell are moral and material conditions. Heaven and hell are conditions on earth reflecting one's moral and material conditions here on earth. Heaven and hell, I repeat, are conditions reflecting one's moral and material conditions here on earth. Therefore, Malcolm said, and he talked from a framework of Islam, no one's mind should be in the sky. In Islam, he says, everyone works. Heaven demands hard work. Therefore, in Islam, he said, there is no room for laziness and no room for ignorance. In the context of this earth-based and human-focused religion, Malcolm's ethical project has 3 basic dimensions to it, as I said before. An intellectual one, a spiritual one, and a practical one. 3 dimensions to Malcolm's ethical tension and his ethical project. An intellectual dimension, a spiritual dimension, and a practical dimension. The first dimension is one of coming into consciousness. That's what he means by wake up. Coming into consciousness, which is a struggle against both ignorance and illusion. And an acquisition of self-knowledge, which includes knowledge of God, the oppressor, and the world. Secondly, there's a spiritual dimension of cleansing oneself of vices which erode and undermine one's claim to worthiness for membership in the community of righteousness. That's cleanup. Finally, Malcolm said, you have to stand up. No matter how clean you are, no matter how much you know, if you don't seek justice, if you don't engage yourself in the struggles of the masses, it's all to no advantage. Malcolm's ethical vision then is rooted in a concept of a human being that is above all a commitment and a belief in human transformability. Malcolm believes, not only because of his theology, his Judeo-Christian Islamic theology, that humans are divine by nature and can be more than you first see them as. But he also bases this commitment to the belief in human transformability because he transformed himself. Because he raised himself from the lowest depths and became one of our most honored and honorable men. Right. Malcolm argued that it is people at the bottom of the social heap, plagued by vice and poverty and hopelessness of ghetto life, who will make the best kinds of Muslims and people who struggle for liberation. Now, why would Malcolm put so much emphasis on the most vulnerable, or what he called those people at the bottom of the social heap? Like of times we don't even want to deal with people at the bottom of the social heat. We're actually trying to get on the mountain, so we can't go back down. But Malcolm said these people can make the most, they're capable of the most drastic change, the most fearless, and withstand the longest. This, Malcolm argues, is because they have nothing to lose, for they didn't have anything in the first place.
Right.
But also he argues that way because he says, I quote him, I myself am a prime example of this category, and a graphic example as you can find of the salvation of the black man.
Yes.
Believing in others because he believed in himself. Believing they can make the rites of passage to manhood and martyrdom because he did it himself. His description of his fierce rites of passage marks it as a passage from nothing to something, moving from nobody to somebody. Thus his call to wake up, clean up, and stand up is one which evolves not only out of a profound belief in human possibility, but also from a concrete personal passage marked by a severe and successful struggle himself to achieve what is urged and required by others. What is Malcolm's first dimension of his moral project? The first step in Malcolm's ethical project is coming into consciousness, or as he expressed it, waking up to knowledge of self, God, and the devil all present. This waking up, Malcolm argues, precedes and makes possible the other two fundamental steps toward freedom, which are to clean up and stand up. As Malcolm states, quote, when a man understands who he is, who his God is, who the devil is, then he can pick himself up out of the gutter. He can clean himself up and stand up like a man should before his people and his God. The centrality and priority of knowing truth runs all through Malcolm's teaching. Malcolm's called ignorance a grave of ignorance. Imagine that concept. People living in a grave of ignorance. They're actually dead. Do you understand? And because they're dead, they're also deceased. When people are dead, you understand? This is a cold concept, baby. When people are actually dead, there's two things you got to do to them. You got to either bury them or resurrect them. If you leave the dead lying around, it's got to eventually affect you. Excuse me if I'm wrong now. This is a cold analysis, but it's real. You got to get away from it, or you got to resurrect it. Now, Malcolm believed we had to resurrect it. That's the beauty of his teaching, is that he did not leave anybody out. He did not dismiss anybody. And he believed more in the downtrodden, or what Fanon calls the wretched of the earth, than he did anybody else. That's a mark of a great leader. Mary McLaren Bethune said that you can tell the level of moral leadership by the relationship that the leaders have with the masses, by their concept of their role with the masses. That's what Bethune said, and I believe that. That is why she said Frederick Douglass was such a great leader, because he rooted himself in love for the people. And certainly she would have said the same thing about Malcolm. Malcolm argued that we should learn the truth. Malcolm believed in the transformative power of the truth. Now, you know, the nationalists are always talking about know the truth, you know. It'll set you free. They always say you got to know yourself. They even get Elizabethan and say, know thyself. Not just know yourself, but know thyself. That seems to have more weight, doesn't it? Know thyself. But what does it mean to know yourself? We're going to talk about that in a minute in Malcolm's context. Malcolm said truth is transformative. It will free the oppressed, first from psychological damage and dependence. If you know the truth of yourself, you won't walk in the pale shadow of your master. You'll carve out your own space. You'll speak your own special truth and make your own unique contribution to the forward flow of human history. Malcolm said, quote, it will open your eyes and enable us to see the oppressor as he really is. A lot of times people don't know who the oppressor is. They're confused about who the oppressor is. Another thing that Malcolm says is that truth will stand us on our feet and make us walk for ourselves instead of leaning on others who mean our people no good. Finally, he said, truth not only shows us who our real enemy is, truth also gives us the strength and know-how to separate ourselves from that enemy of human freedom. So Malcolm said, wake up to the truth. Malcolm
Malcolm said that to know oneself is the beginning of the search for truth. And to know oneself is above all to know one's history, one's origin, your name, your nation, your God. We are an African people, as Malcolm taught. Being born in America does not adequately describe who we really are. We are, in fact, an African people, and we must act under the burden of their history. Black is a color, but African is our culture. It is really the source of identity, purpose, and direction. Wake up, Malcolm said, to your past, your present, and your future, because in that you see your potential. It's a building on what Garvey said. What humans have done, humans can do. So when I study my history, which Malcolm said rewards me above all research, then I know not only who I am, but the awesome burden of what I must do to justify myself, to make myself worthy to stand before my people and my God. That's what it means. We must challenge ourselves to not simply duplicate what Malcolm and Bethune and Anna Julia Cooper and Muhammad and Martin King and Mary McLeod Bethune. We must not only, duplicate what they've done, but in fact, actually go beyond it. That almost seems heretical to some people. But the reality is a generation that does not advance its people further than its father and mother is a generation that has less justification for life. After all, why are we here? To make babies and problems? What are we here for? Wake up then to what it means to be African in America. We must, in fact, build our community and stand together. Malcolm said it, we are the moral vanguard of America, and we must set the moral and progressive agenda of this country. Wake up, Malcolm said, not only to yourself in history, in the future, in the present, but wake up to your oppressor. We are oppressed by a certain people, racist rulers, capitalist rulers, sexist rulers, you call them what you want. But the reality is, they don't have the right to ruin our lives and to sleep in peace after they do it. Malcolm said it, didn't he? No justice, no peace. Malcolm said the white man has no right to sleep in peace if we don't sleep in freedom. That's right. That's the attitude you got to have. Wake up to self, to oppressor. Wake up to the world. Who are our friends and who are allies? We are our own liberators. People that cannot save itself, as I've often taught, is lost forever. But everyone needs allies. Wake up to who are our real allies. Other oppressed and progressive people. We must stretch out our hands at them. See they have similar problems, and don't let the oppressor divide and continue to rule, ruin, and ride roughshod over all our lives. Malcolm said the function of knowledge is its value as an antidote to the poison of self-hatred and ignorance evolving out of the Holocaust of African enslavement and subsequent racist oppression. It was and remains a fundamental teaching of Malcolm that the Holocaust was directed toward rendering Africans what he called deaf, dumb, and blind to the truth, and especially the truth of self, God, the devil, or the oppressor. Malcolm notes how the European slaveholder cultivated in Africans historical amnesia concerning the great civilizations they had built and taught them to see themselves as ex-savages and ex-heathen, saved by the grace without greed of a generous white man. And he points out that too many Africans, quote, accepted this along with every other teaching of the slave master that was designed to make them obey and worship the white man. These teachings, Malcolm said, was designed to make us obey and worship the white man. It's good on Malcolm's 67th birthday to ask ourselves, do we obey the white man? Do we worship him, unconsciously or consciously? Some people just outright Tom. But then there are those who collaborate in their own oppression without knowledge of it. How do we collaborate in our own oppression? Certainly, as I said, by timing, but also being the failures that the white man predicts you would be. How is it that he feels confident enough to predict our death by 2000? How can he take out 25% of black men and render them useless in the social process? It is because they collaborate also in their own Brewster studies. He says we are criminal, and then we act against each other in a criminal fashion. That is collaborating in our own oppression. You have to understand that. Malcolm said too many, that's his words, too many Africans accepted this, along with every other teaching. Need then is to retrieve and restore our history, and rescue and reconstruct our humanity, for the two are dialectically linked. Malcolm also talks about black people singing. They want to be washed as white as snow. But then he notes in one of his last speeches, quote, it's not the black person's fault. It is the result of 400 years of brainwashing here in America. In fact, he says to the oppressor, quote, you have taken a man who is black on the outside and made him white on the inside. And it is this will and work to destroy another human being that both Muhammad and Malcolm define as diabolical. Now listen to what I said. This will and work to self-consciously destroy another human being that Malcolm calls diabolical. You know, a lot of people want to say Malcolm backed away from calling the oppressor diabolical. Well, he used other words, but he was still talking about what a man, what another human being does to another human being to self-consciously destroy that other human being is in fact diabolical. Do you know what it means to lay up all night thinking of ways to humiliate and deform black people, other people of color, not being satisfied with letting them walk on the screen, having to mutilate them, to put their eyes out in the 40th century, to cut off their hands, to put one of them with a spine on his head, to have blacks actually look like mascot in space on Star Trek. You know what? I hate to even see blacks in a movie. I'd rather go see a movie, ain't no blacks in it. Because in the final analysis, they're going to deform them. Even when they have a black movie. That was the point with the Spike Lee movie, if you remember. People had expected. Have I talked to y'all about that since? If y'all remember, I had said, before the movie even came out, that I had 3 fundamental problems with it. And they all took place in the context of a racist Hollywood convention. That is, Hollywood would never see black people, if black people worked under them and agreed to what they were doing, would never let black people walk in dignity and pose a heroic or respectable image on TV or in the movies. Hollywood just doesn't have any room for that. And even though Spike said it was his joint, it was really Warner Brothers' picture. Warner Brothers said they had put it together to, quote, take the sting out of Malcolm's personality and make him acceptable to whites. So even in a black movie, this is what happened. What do you think happened when blacks just show up for local color in a white movie? Preying on the black woman. The black woman's always talking loud, honey, honey, just stereotypically Beulah throughout the ages. Sapphire with a new hairdo. You understand? How do you think we act out the European definition of us? Lack of knowledge of our own self and historical responsibility it places on us, and a resultant collaboration in our own oppression. Malcolm said the first thing you have to do to actually engage in an ethical liberational project is to wake up. Because if you don't wake up, you're a liability not only to yourself, but to others around. Do you see this analogy? The grave of ignorance. The grave of ignorance. How many people you know that make knowledge a morally compelling act? That you can't be moral if you're willfully ignorant. Because you damage not only yourself, but everybody around us. Because our fate and future is collective. We ought to rise together or fail altogether. That's right. We are all representatives of our own people. And everything you do, good or bad, reflects on me. Therefore, you don't have the right to be wrong for moral cleansing, spiritual recovery, if you will. And this is the hardest part for the nationalists to deal with. They can even get along with knowing yourself. You know, they always talk about that. And they always say they know the history. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
But Malcolm taught you have to clean yourself up morally. Malcolm's ethical imperative of cleaning up is essentially one of making oneself a worthy member in the community of righteousness, able to stand upright without vice or shame. Did you hear what I said? Without vice or shame. How many people are doing things in the dark they're ashamed of if you turn the light on? Malcolm's teaching on this reflects a personal portrait of his passage from what he defined as the depths of depravity to the heights of spiritual awareness, discipline, and commitment. Before hearing Islam, he said, quote, I had nothing, knew nothing, was nothing. I was addicted to and enslaved by the evils and vices of this white civilization. Listen to the things he lists now. Dope, alcohol, adultery, and even murder. Unquote. Locked at the bottom level of life, Malcolm saw himself as, quote, buried up to his neck in the mud of this filthy world with very little hope, desire, or intention of amounting to anything. Is that a terrible picture? Buried up to his neck in the mud of the filth of the world without any hope or desire. Now see, no, he mentioned three things. Without any hope, desire, or intention to amount to anything. Do you know what it means when you don't have no hope, no desire, and no intention of being anything except nothing? That's why he is so sure that you and I can raise ourselves up, because here he is down on the ground, buried up to his neck in the mud of this filthy world with very little hope, desire, or intention to amount to anything. In fact, he concludes, he was so low, quote, he was actually walking on his own coffin. I like the grave of ignorance, walking on your own coffin. Now, how many blacks are actually walking on their own coffin and think they're walking on wood floor? How many blacks are living a life so dangerous and self-destructive they're actually walking on the coffin? Now, this is what Malcolm lists. I didn't even get to all the other things. Get to it. He said, we have to have programs. Listen to this. I'm going to take each one of them. To rid the community, first he said, is this even worse than when he said it? Dope addiction. Second, prostitution. Third, adultery. Fourth, fornication. Now, you know Malcolm's in trouble here. Then gambling, laziness, lying, cheating, stealing, irresponsibility, and a host of other vices. Malcolm lists them all. Now, you know, it's just like when Malcolm told people they had to give up hog. They thought he was just off. They believed they had to eat hog. They would tell them how they grew up on hog. You know, this is really mainly a spiritual discipline for them. No, people can eat hog and live. That's the black man. And woman. You understand? It's a spiritual discipline to back off from. And it originated in a place where hog killed people. Second, once you start studying diet, you know, fat, hog got a lot of fat content. But so does beef, by the way. So let's admit that this is a spiritual discipline. And what people don't want to have is discipline. But without discipline, there's no development. In fact, you know, I have a reputation of arguing for strict discipline. There is no way around discipline yourself. See, that's another thing. I was telling people this morning, Earl Fighty interviewed me and asked me, how could I outlast other groups in the 60s, like the Panthers and other groups? And I said that one thing was we rooted in a value system. But the second thing I told him is that we had a discipline. So that when pressure was put on us, we didn't run it. We knew what to expect. Being ideologically rooted, they couldn't surprise us. I remember telling my house, I said to my house, can you handle me being away from you you at least 5 years. You got to be ready for that, because KB is going to come. No illusions here. If you're with me, but then it was Saul, because when I was arrested, she was too. It's not like I had to explain to her when I got back. You understand? So we know the white man is going to arrest him. We know he's going to trump up charges on him. We know he's going to try to break us and whittle us down to fit his conception of us, to fit us in his formula of white supremacy, which says a nigger ain't nothing and will never be nothing. We don't have the right to rebel, but actually we do. In his formula, we don't have the right to rebel. But in our formula, not only do we have the right to rebel, we have the responsibility to rebel. But you don't know how important that is. And you can't really do it in good consciousness if you are not morally clean. You know, a lot of people, talk black. Did you know that?
Yeah.
That means drop black here and there and know the right books. But you gotta follow them home to see what they really are. You gotta see how they relate to the woman or the man, how they relate to the children. You gotta see what's on their wall. You gotta see whether they have books, and if they got books, whether dust is on them or they're well used. See, this is posturing. A lot of people posture. That's why black nationalists have trouble relating to people, because they posture so much. Remember, I start off saying that. I'm a nationalist, so I'm not like stepping outside. I'm making an internal criticism. Tell it. And one of the things that they don't want to do is stop doing what they're doing if it's not convenient for them. Malcolm said in his autobiography that he felt good. The Islam raised him out of that pit, that grave of ignorance, that place where he's walking on his own coffin. It made him a man among men, a Noah among the knowledgeable, a devoted teacher, a dedicated student, one respected and listened to, a fearless follower, and a self-sacrificing soldier committed to liberation and a high level of human life. 20 years away from his submersion in a muck and mire of the corrupt and corruptive world, he said in his autobiography, he found himself at Harvard University. And he looked out a window on what he suddenly realized was his old criminal hangout. And he immediately realized, quote, how deeply Islam had reached down into the mud to lift me up, to save me from being what I would have inevitably been. And what was that? Lost, dead, insane, or at best eking out a miserable and precarious existence in the underworld. But instead, faith, Malcolm tells us, instead of that faith, Malcolm tells us, quote, Allah has blessed me to learn about Islam, which it enabled me to lift myself up from the muck and mire of this rotting world. It is Malcolm taught. It is Malcolm taught evil and immoral thought and behavior that deform and destroy the human person, limits and deny him or her spiritual and social development, and makes her or him unable to realize her full potential in both the divine and human sense. Malcolm's concern then is with addiction. First chemical, then psychological or behavioral, which destroy the human person and undermine the necessary struggle for liberation. Malcolm challenges the African to raise beyond her history of oppression, to raise beyond his current condition of domination and submission, to seek truth, to do right, and struggle for freedom, justice, and human equality. He teaches that in spite of conditions, quote, the black man in the ghetto has to start self-correcting his own material, moral, and spiritual defects and evil. How many of us honestly believe we should speak truth and do justice? How many of us actually believe that we shouldn't lie or cheat or deceive? How many of us believe it's morally compelling to always posit unity and to give what's best, to always be in harmony with those who mean the most to us? How many people actually believe it is important to make a commitment? One of the problems with nationalist men, and this is what nationalist men, I'm not talking about all nationalist men, I'm just challenging nationalists. You know what I mean? Is that black nationalists who should set the model for commitment to women. I'm talking about men now. They can't make a commitment. That's a serious problem. And it's morally irresponsible not to make the commitment. You can't just up nothing. Can't just walk away with the whole prize and not put anything in the bank. What is the justification a nationalist man makes for not making the ultimate commitment to his woman? What do you think is the excuse he uses? Baby, I'm not ready. When are you going to get ready? You 26? You 30, you 45. What are you waiting for? A sign in heaven? You're not Nat Turner. I think that one of the major problems in Malcolm's moral teachings, that we live a moral life, is that black men especially have problems making moral commitments. First to the woman, then to themselves, and to those around them. Now think about that. Think about all the excuses you heard your brother. I know everybody in here is committed. Think about all the excuses you heard you and your brother give for not being committed to your woman or enough to dedicate your life to her as you asked her to dedicate her life to you. I'm just asking you. Now, I could say the women need to make commitment, but you know and I know the women are the first ones to ask for it. And you know and I know that the black man has to, in the final analysis, act with leadership qualities in certain matters. No matter what new knowledge we get from the women's liberation movement. I believe that if the black man does not stand up and provide leadership for his family and his community, he'll never be respected by his own people or those who watch him and judge him accordingly. That's just a reality. We can't sit in the sideline and talk about living an individually located life. On one hand, you say you're African. You say African is collective. You can't make the first union. See, if Malcolm, that brings us to treating women a certain way. Now, you know, Malcolm was hard on women. When he first started, he should teach some hard lessons. You read his autobiography. He was talking about how you couldn't trust women. But what Malcolm had is a street conception of women. And then when he got in the nation, he heard Christian, Judeo-Christian and Islamic teachings against the women, as he said, that reinforced this attitude, that woman is the weaker sex. Well, anybody believe that now? No. We got time to stop. I'd like to just discuss things. That you had to control them. And a lot of women now, black feminine, criticizing Malcolm, talking about he was sexist and all that. But they don't understand that, yes, Malcolm began to talk that, he taught that, but toward the end of his life, guess what? When he had to depend on Betty, he began to see women in a different kind of way. That's right. The men that he had committed himself to began to search for him. And he saw that the woman stood with him when everybody turned against him. He's in a context where he actually believed this is a divine set. And yet, his brotherhood that he cherished so much now turned to be a danger to him. Isn't that something? Yeah. Now, the woman there is right there with him. And the woman supports him. And then he begins to say things like, I believe that women must, in fact, be given latitude to develop according to what they desire. But Malcolm said, and I want to read this, he says, I got here. Okay. After his travels in Africa, he states, quote, he became thoroughly convinced of the importance of giving freedom to the woman, giving her education, and giving her the incentive to get out there and put the same spirit and understanding in her children. To move out of the house. Do you know what that means for a Muslim to say that? To get out and engage the world. He also said, in every country, the degree of progress can never be separated from the degree of progress of the woman. In other words, you any country by the equality of relationship between men and women. That's a strong statement from serious Muslim.
That's right.
Quote, I'm one person who's forgiven women all the leeway possible because they've made a greater contribution than many of us men. This is Malcolm toward the end of his life. Before that, he would say, you got to control women. See, now when I say this is not to put Malcolm down. It's showing you how you have to challenge even the most sacred teachers. Look into them and say, aren't they situated in a certain time? Aren't they situated in a certain place? And do we have to believe everything to respect the person? See, a lot of times nationalists believe, if you don't believe everything people talk, you got to hate it. First time somebody disagree with you. I told Brother Karenga the other day when I saw him.
Yeah.
I didn't like all that. Tossed him. Why not just say, Maulana, look, you know what? I think that's, I got a different position than that. Tell me what it is and then defend it. You don't need to get mad with me. I'm not mad with you. What did Malcolm say? Malcolm said, black people, listen to it, must correct their own material, moral, and spiritual defects. Malcolm said that the white oppressor can never give the black man and woman self-respect. That black people will gain respect for themselves and in the eyes of others when they do for themselves what everybody else is doing. And when they, in fact, live a moral life that they can be proud of, by which they can measure themselves, that they have standards which are what I said, mirrors, moral mirrors, by which we measure ourselves. I want you to understand that Malcolm, even though he taught sexism in the beginning, toward the end of his life, was concerned with the liberation of black women. Second, I want you to know that even when he was talking that backward talk, you might as well call it backward because you don't agree with it now, do you? Is that he was concerned with respect for black men and black women. Listen to this category of respect. The difference between Malcolm X and the women's liberation movement is that the women's liberation movements on this issue talk and make as a central category the concerns for rights and justice.
That's right.
Malcolm made his central concern respect. And in an intimate relationship, follow me now, in an intimate relationship, respect is more an appropriate category than rights and justice.
Right.
There's nowhere in the world I would ever come to my house and say, you know what, you violate my rights. And I would be shocked if my house said, hey, I need rights in this house. No, what she got to be concerned about is that I respect her in every way. And part of that respect is never violating what is unspoken, but nevertheless, her rights as a fundamental rights as a human being. But we never talk about that. And whenever you're in a situation with a woman or a man, and the woman or a man begin to talk about rights, you're laying the basis for antagonism. Because already then, you're treating each other like the established order, and you're engaging in antagonistic struggle rather than non-antagonistic. It already tells you what kind of relations you have. If somebody is treating you in such a way that you feel your very rights are being violated, why are you with them? So Malcolm had a right category even when he was talking a little sexism or big sexism. He nevertheless was concerned about what happened to women. Do you know, I told you that Malcolm's concept of women evolved in the street. And it wasn't just simply that he thought they showed weakness. It was also because he saw them run through and sold and put on a slab like a hunk of meat and portioned off. He saw every part of their body sold. Imagine that. Every part of their body depending upon what freak wanted them. That's why he wanted to build a wall of protection around them. But the reality is, when you build a wall around a protection of a woman, and the woman is not engaged in the building of the wall herself, it's imprisonment rather than protection. That's what you have to deal with. Like my brother said, he was in the street. He just said, if a woman is with you, Even if people capture her, tie her up, she won't cooperate. If she's against you, even if you dare, she's find a way to humiliate you and betray you. I don't have, do you realize I can feel I talk I got a good program. You know what? People hear what you want to. You can babble. If somebody likes you, they'll go with you and help your speech out later. People got to stop believing in this all-powerful, masculine, macho thing. Really, brother, you don't really. Save that. People are convinced by what they want to be convinced by.
Right.
Oh, yeah, you can trick a couple of people, but the majority of people actually let you trick them. So let's stop tricking and start talking. Let's start relating on the basis of equality. And the lesson is, the first morality is in your personal relationship. And how you treat your woman and your man is evidence of what kind of person you really are.
That's right.
I've said this so many times, I say it again. Your mother might say anything about you. You could be a thug galore, and she'll say, oh, that's still my son. He wouldn't do that. But let me talk to your woman. She'll tell me what you really do. So, male-female relations are central to this moral project. There is no way that you can honestly be morally committed to liberation of black people and enslave your woman.
Right.
There's no way in the world you can believe in human equality and then say the woman is inferior or the weaker sex.
Right.
There's no way you can say you're building the nation and tearing down your woman.
Right.
There's no way that you can say you're committed to black people and can't commit yourself to a woman.
That's right.
That's the lesson today on the 67th birthday. See, this takes it out of the sky, puts it down on earth, where you have to walk and talk. Malcolm said Islam was an earthbound religion. He said, what I'm teaching is earth focus. It ain't in the sky. Whatever's going to happen there, you can handle that when you get there. You'll be in another 4 minutes after you get there. The reason is, the real reality is how we live here. Whatever you got to give to God, the ancient Egyptian text said, give it to the people. Especially to the poor. For God stands satisfied when the poor are cared for. Give it to your woman. Give it to your husband. Give it to your sister, your brother, your children. Give it to your mother and your father, your grandmother and your grandfather. Then we can respect you. All that old abstract, I love the people, I'm for black people. What about your woman? What about your man? What about your child? What are you teaching them? You let them have them white pictures on the wall? How many of y'all, not y'all, I said, how many people talk all that talk and let their children run wild? You know, I've talked this before. Nationalist children are some of the most unruly and undisciplined children in the world. Did you know that? And that's because nationalists are some of the worst parents in the world. Because they were restricted, they don't want to restrict their children. Because they missed a lesson, they don't get their children no lesson. They got a long list of reasons why they don't set the moral framework for how children ought to act. But we've got to speak truth, do justice, and walk in the way of righteousness. The final teaching of Malcolm in his ethics of liberation after wake up and clean up, coming into consciousness and living a moral life, a morally rooted life, is getting engaged in the struggle, seeking justice. You understand that part of your cure for transforming yourself, for getting the knowledge you need to wake up, must take place in exchange with other people on the road to black revolution. Do you realize you can't get wise by yourself? Did you know that? Because your wisdom is untested if you're sitting in a corner bragging about how sharp you are. The question is, how does what you believe and what you say measure against people that oppose you? I welcome people that oppose me. They compel me to look again and again at what I teach. That's why when I have interviews, I can anticipate what the interview is going to ask. Because I am the first one to criticize what I say. I look at at it from different sides. Even though I say we ought to have a black nation, do you know I can make arguments against it? Everything I argue, I can give a counter-argument to it. And I'm arguing that only in a context of brotherhood and sisterhood that is not a mutual admiration society, but a creative challenge, can we ever develop, can we ever wake up and clean up. Do you know what? If you live by yourself, you and your woman, and nobody else sees you, you might deteriorate. Did you know that? It's having to come out and face others that make you think you got to clean up. Think about it. I'll give you a good example. And the way I'm going to give this example in terms of clothes, it's the same way morally. When you get home, you might put on anything or nothing. But when you do that, if somebody comes to the door, if you do, it shows you done got used to looking so bad it don't matter. But the average person wants to put their best foot forward when they meet others. That's why a brother is really a creative challenge to you. A sister is really a creative challenge to you. And only by struggling to clear a space where we can live and love freedom can we ever be the kind of men and women that Malcolm said we ought to be. Only by building a brotherhood and sisterhood can we, in fact, wake up, clean up, and stay standing up. Malcolm argues that one of the things that he wanted from the nation most is for the nation to engage in struggles with other black people. He said, quote, if I harbor any personal disappointment whatsoever about the nation, it was that privately I was convinced that our Nation of Islam could be an even greater force in the black man's overall struggle if we engaged in more action. By that he meant that, quote, the nation should have amended or relaxed its general non-engagement policy. And whenever black people committed themselves in the Little Rocks and Birminghams and other places, militantly and disciplined Muslims should also be there for all the world to see, respect, and discuss. Thus Malcolm posed and fought for an engaged community which would play a vanguard role in the struggle for liberation. Malcolm argued that a community is first a spiritual shield and shelter against the corrupt and corruptive environment, but it is also an instrument of struggle to bring into being a new world of freedom, justice, and equality. Quote, just as the old ideas must be removed to make way for the new, so the evil features of this wicked old world must be exposed, faced up to, and removed in order to make way for the new world which God himself is preparing to establish. And it is a religious community or the moral community that you're in that must be in the vanguard of the struggle, turning prayers into practice and aspirations into righteous action. That will lead toward liberation and a higher level of human life. Most of the nationalists I know don't belong to any organization. Don't raise your hand, but I want to ask you, how many of y'all are committed to an organization? You see, how can you ever believe we can get free just by discussing blackness and talking about how bad the white man is? In the final analysis, practice proves everything. If you're really black and committed, why can't you commit yourself to an organization? Why can't you commit yourself to a brother? Why can't you commit yourself, again, to a sister? Why can't you commit yourself to a certain amount of principle and live them out and engage other people in the challenge to be other than what the oppressor would want us to be? That's a good argument to make. Ask yourself when you go home tonight, why am I not in an organization? Most people aren't. Did you know that? That's why the movement suffers. One of the great challenges that we have, black people, is to rebuild the movement we had in the 60s and take the struggle even to a higher level. And we cannot do that if nationalists don't wake up, clean up, and then stand up. Waking up, coming into consciousness, cleaning up, actually living a moral life you can be proud of. In fact, nationalists never talk about morality. That's why they don't see Malcolm as a moral teacher. They see him as a black teacher. But I'm telling you, if the struggle doesn't have a moral dimension, it's not worth engaging in. Cabral said, even if our goals are political, the method by which we achieve them must always be moral. We all must build the moral community we want to live in. And we do that struggling against ourselves and against the oppressor. And Cabral said the greatest struggle is the first struggle. That's why Malcolm said, wake up and clean up, then you can stand up. But if you don't wake up and clean up, you can't stand up. So Cabral said the greatest struggle, regardless of the obstacles that the oppressor put in our path, is a struggle against ourselves. And that's organization, Olga. It's a struggle against that in us, which is in contradiction to our best values and the choice we made for liberation and a high level of human life. I close the way I always close, by paying homage to the people who made our lives possible, who gave meaning and fullness to our lives. Malcolm has said it, we must live in such a way that we stand morally worthy before both our people and our God. And the question to ask on this Malcolm's birthday week, do we stand worthy before our people and God? Also, I close by saying what Fannie Lou Hamer said. We must never forget where we came from and always praise the bridges that carried us over. I raise and praise the name of this great bridge, this soldier and son of Rod, Malcolm, who carried us over. Remember also what Mayor McLeod Bethune said. Let our blackness be a challenge, not an excuse to not perform. She said, I'm glad I was born black, because if I'd been born white, I would not have achieved as much as I did, because I wouldn't have the obstacles to overcome that led to the achievement. Listen to them. Obstacles to her was a call to, was a challenge to achieve. Obstacles to others become an excuse not to perform.
Good teaching, brother.
Cabral, again, struggles a long and difficult one, match no difficulties, tell no lies, and claim no evil. Remember that Malcolm fought for this, he died for this. He gave us his life that we could live fuller and more meaningful lives. Let's not forget that. Remember Anna Julia Cooper, who taught there's a male as well as female side to truth. And those who do not accept to do damage to both male and female. That what we do, we must do together as black man and woman. We not let the oppressor hack us in the house to have. And we shoot daggers at each other on the Phil Donahue show. Or the Oprah Winfrey show.
That's right, brother.
Remember the teachings of the ancient Egyptians who said, doing good is not difficult. In fact, just speaking good is a monument for those who do it. For those who do good for others are actually doing good for themselves. Because why? They build a moral community they want to live in. And finally, as the ancient Egyptians taught, act as if every day is a donation to eternity and every hour is a contribution to the future. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Anna Julia Cooper said it's a male as well as female side truth. She said it's a female as well as male side truth. She was pushing for the woman's position, and Sanja for that, Timothy. Okay. Anybody questions? I guess we have questions, right?
A few questions. You can line up here, please, if you have a question. I first want to.
Let me say something. I want to thank the audience for coming out. I know there's a million other things going on. And for you to come out in such numbers, that's a good thing. So give yourself a hand.
First of all, thank you to everyone that came out. The tapes for this lecture will be available at another time, primarily at our symposium in July, but you can contact us later. We'll have that tape ready. Maulana, appreciate your lecture tonight. My question is based on the revisionism of the Nation of Islam seem to be doing when it comes to lecture. And primarily, Khalid Muhammad has been coming to slave leader. And when people relate as to what he said, it seems to be totally unlike what we're hearing as far as current information. And then Farrakhan spoke by satellite.
I don't understand what you just said.
Okay.
What are you saying?
Well, so what I'm primarily saying is that there seems to be, as we know the history of Malcolm, that we were there when these things happened.
Yeah.
They seem to be changing the facts of whatever's happening. I mean, it's just like it's almost as if they're validating the wives, the young ladies that were that Elijah had the children by. They're stating that Malcolm was a hypocrite and disorder. That the Nation of Islam was in disorder. I would like you to speak to whether you know why they would be doing this revisionism.
Okay. Yes. That's such a Timmy. Let me first create a dialogue because I heard some other people responding. Would somebody else like to respond first before I do in terms of what you think is going on here? Anybody? Why don't y'all want? Okay. All right. Yes. Oh, yes. You said?
Yeah. Basically, Flynn's been running around various college campuses. Basically, what they're laying out is that, in terms of revisionist history, they want to put all basically the blame on the government, saying that the nation had nothing to do with the assassination. It's another factor that they basically want to blame on the CIA.
But Bokeem was talking not about the assassination, but about discrediting Malcolm. You were saying about
another
that.
fact in terms of the revisionist history.
Okay. Okay. Appreciate what you said, if I understand it correctly. You know, Malcolm proposes a problematic for the Muslims. And the Muslims say various things depending upon what position they're working out. If you remember, one time it was really harsh on Malcolm, especially during the period before his assassination, saying he's worthy of death, etc. Then after that, when Farrakhan stood up, and Farrakhan used to teach that Malcolm died so he could live. So he talked in parables about Malcolm. And he said Malcolm should not have criticized his teacher. That was the main point. But people began to respond to the Muslim and began to hold the Muslims responsible for Malcolm's murder. And the reality is that a Muslim, according to the interview that Segun did in Black News, a Muslim said he did it because he thought that Malcolm shouldn't attack Muhammad. The question was, what role did the nation play in laying out the conditions for the Muslim to feel he had to kill Malcolm? In order to deal with that, the Muslims decided that what they must do is get the discussion off that and get the discussion on Malcolm. And that meant a campaign to discredit him. Now, I have a lot of respect for Khalid Muhammad. You know, we talked about that this morning. At the same time, I disagree with him totally in the attempt to discredit Malcolm. Malcolm's record, however, stands on his own. And everybody knows that Malcolm was a moral man. He was a committed man. Right. Even when they put him out of the nation, Malcolm said, I still believe that's the best program. It was only when he felt they were actually trying to kill him that he then see that he was no longer part of that community and that he should speak out to what he thought was wrong. Okay? Now, this is a very difficult situation because a lot of people are apprehensive about discussing it. And a lot of people actually feel that they would not like to discredit the nation or Malcolm, either one. So what happens is there's always this tearing between giving the Muslims credit for what they've done, but at the same time holding up Malcolm's name. My argument in our organization position is that, pardon me, I don't see the need for them to discredit Malcolm. What they say to me is untrue. I have no evidence, and they've given no evidence to back up what they say. I think it's wrong to do that. I think it sets a bad situation for a continuation of internecine struggle. I think that it's time to just come to terms with what has happened, what has gone on, and then get beyond it. But the savage campaign on Malcolm is not worthy of the nation. The nation should not do that. Malcolm is a man of stature. There's nothing that anyone can do to discredit Malcolm. Nothing. If somebody could actually create a library of books attacking Malcolm, it wouldn't change. The reality is, closing your eyes don't make the sun go away.
Very good.
Yes. Pardon me, yes.
You want the camera?
Okay. I think I heard earlier that you spoke about Malcolm being in a sort of state of confusion.
I didn't say it was confusing.
No, I think during the
Oh, I said a crisis of faith.
crisis.
Oh, that's a little different than confusion. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I don't think Malcolm was confused at all. See, that's another revisionist category. That's not right.
Okay, well,
They call Malcolm confused.
well, some evidence that I would put forth to show that there was some kind of problem. I don't know if it's in the category of confusion or what, but you know, Malcolm made a speech and he indicted Elijah Muhammad with the bombing of his house. And the evidence that Malcolm presented to the people he was speaking to is that the Nation of Islam was the only ones that knew the layout of his house. And in that speech, he accused Elijah of intentionally trying to kill his babies. Now, I think that, to me, that's not evidence to say that the Nation of Islam is the only ones that knew the layout of his house, given the government involvement through agents.
So why does that mean Malcolm's confused? You might believe he's wrong. You can believe that.
Well, you know,
but the question is, why do you have to call him confused?
Well, like I said to you, you know, we might want to categorize it as something else other than confusion, but it's definitely a problem.
Why do you think he thought that was happening?
Okay, let me just complete what I want to say. It's definitely a problem in Malcolm's thinking, because Malcolm was sharp, you know, and for him to offer up evidence that, you know, or the explanation that they were the only ones that knew the layout of his house, which, you know, really that's not typical of what we would come to expect from Malcolm's thinking.
Say go and then I'll respond to that.
Yeah, appreciate what you said, Brother Ron. You know, I was at a session last night with some of the people that helped at Malcolm form the Muslim Mosque Incorporated with and the OAAU. And that is one of the things that people there were saying, that the nation, Malcolm later on, that same week before he died, he retracted all of that belief that he had about the nation were the ones that were trying to kill him. Also, nobody there for 1 minute, about a dozen or more people, believed for 1 minute that the nation were the people. In fact, they believed that what happened was people were put in the nation to do that, to make it look so. And it's very instructive to hear their analysis of some of the discrepancies that have not come out about how the actual assassination went off and what they believe some of the things are. Some of them had not been together since that assassination, and they were exchanging information about what actually took place, about people being shot, the second man that we've heard about who disappeared, that he was actually shot in the stomach. People saw him put in a police car. They discussed all of these things. So there's a lot of things that haven't come out about the trial. But Malcolm, in his last week of discussing what was happening to him, discredits that. But also, I think more importantly, is that Malcolm is in the heat of battle. So naturally, he may have some disorientation about what is happening to him, seeing all these different forces coming after him. So that's only natural. I mean, he's under fire, literally.
Well, see, I appreciate what Sego said, and I understand that. But if that's the case, then why do the Muslims need to discredit him?
Right.
You see, I understand what Sego said, and that's right, because the FBI put people in everybody's group, including I. So, you know, I understand that. And if you read the Judas Factor and you read the FBI reports, you know there's one up there and actually manipulating the struggle manipulating Muhammad against Malcolm, turning Muhammad against Malcolm.
Right.
Okay, and John Ali, Raymond Sharif, and the rest of those that Farrakhan himself criticized, and Wallace, you know, they were at the center of trying to discredit Malcolm. What bothers me and what becomes a problem is why, if Minister Farrakhan didn't know these people were doing that, why would then they pick up and want to discredit Minister Malcolm? Now, it's not real, even though Malcolm said that he believed it was bigger than the Muslims. He still believed in why he said that, and I remember reading this, that at any time that Muhammad wanted to, he could order all the people not to touch Malcolm. Does anybody disagree with you?
No, I disagree with you.
Okay.
I don't think he can order the people that's not under his authority.
That's right. But now,
You know, the people,
he can.
the government people, you know, who oppose him as Muslims, you know, he can't stop them.
we're talking about the nation. We're not talking about the government people. Did anybody say he could order the government people?
What did you say? What did you say?
I said, Malcolm said, at any time that he wanted to, Muhammad could say, none of my people should touch Malcolm. That you should let Malcolm go his own way.
Okay.
Now, just think of this. You cannot deny there's a hatred of Malcolm in the nation.
No doubt. No doubt.
I understand what's up.
Okay? Now, the hatred of Malcolm in the nation is what Farrakhan himself said laid the basis for Malcolm's assassination. Is that what he said? Rescue me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
He said that. So that's what Malcolm meant.
Well, how responsible was Malcolm for this?
He's responsible for what?
For this hatred?
Oh! Now see, that's another question. You tell me how responsible he is for the hatred.
Okay. The way I look at it is like this.
Keep in mind, Malcolm built the nation, and the last days, Malcolm begged to go back in the nation.
That's right.
Okay? Keep in mind that.
Okay. Did Malcolm build the nation, or did Malcolm continue to build the nation?
Comrade brother, see, here's what we're doing. In any of these kind of discussions, it's who is the best and who's not the best. I'm here to raise Malcolm's name up, not to discredit the nation. The reality is, any objective observer would know that Malcolm put the nation on a national footing and an international footing. Before Malcolm came, I don't even have to finish that.
Well, I think it depends on how you look at it. You know, Malcolm definitely played a role. He played a major.
Did he train the minister? Did he start the paper?
Well,
Did he teach them how to structure and how to fish for and get other people?
well, I would say this.
Let me ask you this. Let me tell
Can I
you.
ask you a question?
Yeah. Quick question. I done raised so many dollars. I don't know why we into this, honestly.
You call for discussion.
Uh-oh.
You call for discussion.
Yeah, we're in the discussion, but I don't know why we in this level, because you're not going to convince me that Malcolm is wrong, and I'm certainly not going to convince you of whatever you think I'm trying to convince you of.
Maulana, we just exchange.
That's it.
We just
But it
exchange.
seems strange to me that you take this position. Be honest.
What position is that, man?
The position that, number one, first, that something's wrong with Malcolm. And you have no evidence of that. For you to say that Malcolm was confused because he thought the Muslims were trying to kill him, when in fact the Muslims ran him in Los Angeles and have been tracking Malcolm, you deny that?
Do I deny that they tracked him?
Whatever you want me to say.
Well, Maulana, can I state my position?
Yeah, you can, but I just wanted to know. See, I don't like to get into this because then people think I'm against the nation. I'm not against the nation, but at the same time, I'm against Savage and Malcolm. I'm against the attempt to discredit Malcolm, and there has been no rational statement from anybody to prove that Malcolm was confused or he was wrong or all that kind of stuff. There's no evidence for that. What's the purpose of discrediting him? What's the purpose of discrediting him?
Well, to me, it's really not a matter of, I'm not here to discredit Malcolm. Okay, like people say, let's set the record straight and move on.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, I love Malcolm. I got Malcolm up and follow me home. He's up on my wall in my car.
What is your point?
Okay?
What's your position on
I
Malcolm?
just want to get my position straight, like you straight.
What's your position on Malcolm?
My position on Malcolm is this: that Malcolm, was a brother. He was a human, and he had human emotions like all brothers. Okay?
But he was a great man.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But he wasn't
He's
beyond.
one of the greatest men of our time.
But he wasn't beyond fault.
What was the purpose of bringing that up?
What was the purpose?
Jesus had problems.
Sure.
Buddha had problems. Muhammad had problems. What is this? What's the purpose of bringing that up?
Because
Well, that's like going to a Muslim meeting and saying that Muhammad was human. How far you think you get with that kind of conversation?
I'm not through. I'm not through.
Go on, right. I'm just discussing with you.
Yeah, okay.
Go on.
Let's discuss. Okay.
We better get out of this, but go on, finish your point.
Okay, the way I see it, okay, is that Malcolm, I believe, started having thoughts.
Come on, just go on, Ron.
It appears to me that Malcolm had began to disagree with the way the Nation of Islam was moving.
He certainly did.
Okay.
What do you think he disagreed with?
Okay.
Oh, all right, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I should let him know.
Okay, and I think that the chicken come home to roost statement was really just symptomatic of a greater problem that was happening between Malcolm and Elijah in the direction that the nation was going. And I feel that what Malcolm should have did was that I think that he should have, at the point that he saw that where the nation was going, where he was thinking, I think he should have left at that point, rather than try to buck, the system within the nation. I think he should have left. I think that the way it appears with his embracing of white Muslims, it seems like to me he should have done that before the explosion happened between him and the nation, because it seems like he just did that not because that's really where he was coming from, but in an attempt to hurt the nation. You have a tape of a meeting that's not widely circulated where Malcolm is talking to the devil, about inside stuff involving the Nation of Islam, and I think that the Nation of Islam perceived Malcolm is possibly dangerous because of what he...
What do you mean possible? Oh, I'm sorry.
Possibly dangerous because of what he knew. And it seemed like he, on that tape, it's apparent to me that Malcolm is out to destroy the Nation of Islam.
Well, let me ask you this, and then we need to move on. What could Malcolm know that was good, that would destroy the Nation of Islam?
That was good?
Yes. Was it anything good that he knew that would destroy the nation?
Well, everything is perception.
Do y'all understand the question? You understand the question?
But we deal in 64. We dealing with perception. I mean, Malcolm was...
I don't think Malcolm could destroy the nation. In fact, history has proven that regardless of what is said about the nation, some people are going to believe in it regardless. That's the reality. And people will defend the nation against Malcolm, like some people would defend Malcolm against the nation. I don't see where that's going to get us anywhere. What we need to do is ask principle. Do people have a right to speak truth? Do they have a right to disagree? Do they have a right to disagree without threat to their life?
Malcolm did not have a right to...
I didn't say Malcolm. Let's leave Malcolm out of it, because we got to deal with principle. If you don't deal with principle, you're going to always argue for the nation or for Malcolm. You can't argue.
I'm dealing with principle.
Well, let's just say the principle. Don't mention no name. Let's deal with principle. Tell me what principle you're upholding.
He's handling good. Go ahead.
No, I said, tell me what principle you argue.
Truth.
Okay. Now
Whether,
tell me.
whether a person has the right to speak the truth.
That's right. Okay.
Right. No, in some cases a person does not have the right to speak the truth. They have the freedom to speak the truth, but they don't have the right to speak the truth. No. In all cases,
What's
they
the
don't.
difference? What's the difference between the freedom and the right?
Oh, it's a big difference. Right deals with a particular order of what might be ethically right or morally correct. Okay. The freedom to do so. People who are unrestrained. Freedom, deals with being unrestrained. You understand what I'm saying?
No, I don't.
What's that?
I don't understand what you're saying because really you haven't made a
Freedom and
distinction
right.
between.
Freedom and right is not the same thing, Maulana.
Oh, it is. It is. Freedom of speech is the right to speak. Does anybody think it's anything different? Freedom of press is right to press.
No.
Freedom of assembly is the right to assemble.
Freedom does not necessarily deal with morality, Maulana.
Now you done got on something else.
No, I'm making a distinction between. I'm making.
Okay, we're gonna have to go. All right, Rob. All right. I understand, but we need to talk about this on the side because you know that. See, and this is another thing. Part of the discourse is muffled. Like when I ask somebody, do they want to speak? They talk on the side, but they won't talk out. That kind of atmosphere is not good. Where you have an idea, but you don't want to advance it. We must be in a context where we can speak freely and engage each other in creative challenge. We must challenge each other. And I think it's telling that, well, I'm not going to get it because Rob would want to respond, but I think it's very important. No, I'm saying we can't get off on this. Go on, brother.
Okay.
Do y'all understand my position? My position is that it's wrong to try to discredit Malcolm. Not only because it's false, but because it does not do anybody any good. And it's really, really against what Fannie Heyman taught. There are two things we must care about. Never to forget where we came from, and always praise the bridges that carry us over. If it wasn't for Malcolm, many of us sitting here would have a different consciousness. And people can say what they want. Even the Muslims used to say that. If you heard Muhammad before you heard Malcolm, you might have a different opinion of the nation. I'm telling you, you just have to face these things. And that doesn't discredit Muhammad. Muhammad had his own gift. It doesn't discredit the nation. The nation made its own contribution. But you don't need to whittle down Malcolm and step on Malcolm's head to get a height yourself. That's not a good thing to do.
Okay. Two questions, Dr. Karenga. One short and one I think might take a few seconds. In discussions about Malcolm and the nation, I usually take the position of supporting Malcolm. But there's one question that brothers throw at me that I'm not able to handle. And that is, why did Malcolm go to the press about the children? Why did he, because there's an interview, I think they showed on the Like It Is tape with Malcolm saying about how the illegitimate children of Elijah Muhammad. He's saying that in sort of like a news conference kind of situation. So I always say, well, Malcolm did this. Even the chickens come home to roost. I said, well, Malcolm was speaking the truth. He felt he had a responsibility to say the comment about Kennedy. But then they said, well, why did Malcolm go public with this thing about Elijah Muhammad? And I'm always saying, well, I have to throw my hands up. That's something that I'm not in a position to answer. So from your information base, what do you think?
If you talk about it and remove the personalities, it's easy to understand.
Yes, sir.
If you feel rejected, if you feel people trying to kill you, if you feel that all you work for your whole life has been destroyed by a contradiction, why wouldn't you talk about it? Second, the question has to be first asked, why did Muhammad sit Malcolm down? Why did Muhammad listen to John Ali and Raymond Sharif and the rest of them against Malcolm? Why did he do that? You see, you're in power relationships. And evidently Muhammad felt that Malcolm was a challenge to him. And he felt that Malcolm, as he said, was getting too big. And he set Malcolm down. Malcolm felt he wasn't getting big. In fact, if you remember, Malcolm said when he first heard it, first thing he thought about after the shock was to develop scripture to justify it, like Farrakhan is doing.
Right.
That's what he argued. You remember that?
Yes.
Right. Scripture to justify it. That's what he said. He talked to Wallace about it. Then he went to talk to, I think he talked to Mr. Farrakhan about it, did he? Now, once he brought it out, once he said, well, okay, a man's words, this is Malcolm teaching, a man's deeds, lifelong deeds should outweigh one thing he did.
Right.
That's what he was going to teach. And that you judge it. Later, Mr. Farrakhan would teach that. No, for a while the Muslims used to teach that. Before they began to develop the whole thing about polygamy, they used to teach that you can't condemn him for this one act. Then they developed their whole argument about polygamy. But then the people challenged that by saying, well, why not announce it?
Right.
So what you have to do is realize this is a struggle. This is a struggle about power. It doesn't have anything to do with, like, this personality is bad, this person. It's a power consideration of what role Malcolm would play. And I believe, and I've written this, and you know I've written this, and I based it on some of the things that Mr. Farrakhan has said himself, and some of the things that Malcolm and Muhammad said. And some of the things that were in the FBI reports. That there was a group in the nation, part of the FBI, and some people just hated Malcolm, resented him for the stature he had, and wanted to discredit him. And that they succeeded in doing that. So, I mean, you know, if you're fighting, it doesn't surprise me that people would, you know, attack each other. That doesn't seem a surprising thing to me. I would rather they both didn't do it. It's just like I told, one time I said this, and, well, I'll say it again. It really, you know, I used to see Malcolm and Muhammad as models. I used to want to have a second person like Malcolm was to Muhammad. And when Malcolm and Muhammad broke, that was a great hurt to me. And then the whites on campus, I was at UCLA at the time, whites on campus, they came and wanted to brag, look, you see what happened? You know, they were bragging about it. And it bugged me. Then what really hurt me too was when I saw Muhammad discussing Malcolm's death.
Right.
And he said, Malcolm died by what he preached. He preached by what he died by. I didn't see why that was necessary. I didn't want him to say that. And I didn't want Malcolm to criticize Muhammad. I didn't want any one of them to criticize, but they did. Do you understand me? That's what we're dealing with. And people, because personalities are involved, people won't discuss the principle. And the principle is that in a context like that, where people are so religiously rooted, where their whole life is attached to it, and then they're ripped out of that, they respond. This a rap person wouldn't respond, especially if it's a person of stature. There's not one of you in here that if you in an organization gave your whole life to it, and they put you out, say you were in my organization, and you worked to build us, and I put you out. You think you'd go silently and say, Maulana's all right? You have to be honest about these things. These things happen all the time. It's like a woman and a man walking out of a relationship and say, I really loved her. She was fine. I just had to leave her. You know what I mean? People don't do that. Even though, if you remember, Malcolm tried to do that at first. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Do y'all remember the interview he gave to A.B. Spelman? He praised Muhammad. He said, I still, even though I'm away from the nation, I still think it's the best program. It took him a long time to actually get into criticizing the nation. And let me tell y'all something so y'all can know. I don't think anybody is immune from criticism. And I think that if you say everybody else is human, you can't come to a block and say, no, they're not. If you say everybody's human and everybody can be criticized, then you come to a block and say they can't. You got to keep consistency. That's what I talked about, principle. But you don't need to savage either one, the nation or Malcolm. That's my position.
Right.
But you can criticize what you find wrong. But many people won't do that for various reasons, and you know them.
Finally, do you have any comments on the story about the ADL spying on black groups, black organizations?
Oh yeah, the ADL, as you know, was caught spying up in San Francisco. But the argument is that they were doing it all over, and that traditionally they have been in a role, and perhaps other groups like them have been in a role where they needed to to control things, and they needed to discredit who they considered an enemy and get evidence or get support or do support for people that they like. So that's been going on a long time, and it's more widespread than was actually revealed.
Dr. Karenga, I believe that when a person has knowledge of anything, and you keep that knowledge to yourself and you decide not to share it with your community, that's a sin in and of itself. I feel that by Malcolm X going to make his Hajj and coming back with the information that he did come back with, and being rejected by his community as a result of the information that he had, I feel that Elijah Muhammad put I guess you would call it sort of a stopper on the knowledge that the people were really supposed to receive, because Elijah Muhammad is a messenger, or was a messenger, okay? And he was not supposed to be represented as a king. He led his community for as long as he could, and now there's new information that was supposed to come in. Malcolm brought that information in, and I feel that Elijah Muhammad felt that his position was being challenged as a result of that. Instead of working with Malcolm to help enlighten our people a little further, rather than say, hey, my word is it, and making people feel as though there was nothing else outside of his word, which is untrue, Malcolm put Elijah Muhammad in a bad position when he came out, came back to America with his truths. I believe in Malcolm X. I'm disappointed in the things that Elijah Muhammad did with respect to Malcolm X, and I'd like your opinion on what I just said.
Well, appreciating what you said, if I understand correctly, it's obvious, as I said before, that the ruling group in the nation convinced Muhammad that Malcolm was a threat, and that Malcolm was getting beyond himself and saw himself as the new messenger, etc. It's a lot of conversation. There was some rough stuff said about Malcolm, as you know. And if you read those documents in the Judas Factor, it's really crushing to read these things that are said in personal conversations that the white man tapes. It's just, it really throws you off if you read that and see what is being said. So yeah, that's a problematic thing, and it really goes right back to the whole question of power relationships and the need always for us. If any lesson we can learn from that, it's the lesson that we must disagree without feelings. We need to destroy or discredit our opponents. The reality is black people are going to have diverse opinions. We wouldn't even be human if we didn't. Plus, there's no group in the world that doesn't have diverse opinions, so why shouldn't we have? All of us will never belong into one organization. Why should we? There's no other people in the world that belong to one organization. What we must do is learn to live together, build together, struggle together, bring into being a new moral community in which we can all live together and prosper. I think we ought to close here.
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
I've been sitting up here listening to y'all talk.
Listen to what?
Listen to the brothers and sisters talk. Sometimes it's hard to talk when you're not in that position. It's all right to look outside the window and see how dirty it is on the outside. But if you're inside, you might be able to see the windows clean. I say that in reference to this. As far as Malcolm being dismissed, he was dismissed, according to my understanding. He was dismissed because when he said Rooster came home, he was dismissed because white people and black people love Malcolm. They love Kennedy. And they loved him so much that the brother that was selling the paper, life was in jeopardy. That's one of the reasons why he was dismissed, because the brother was in jeopardy of selling the papers. Now, the worst person in the world, as far as I'm concerned, is a religious fanatic. He would kill your mother, your father, and the unborn. Now, there's a thing that you call subliminal seduction. Now, if you know anything, if you ever been in the mosque, you would know that there are certain, what the brother was saying, I agree 1,000%. I'm in agreement with that. But there are certain things that y'all just don't know. You know what I mean? Right. And I'm sitting up here hearing people surmise, and they never was a Muslim. Never was in the mosque. Never was FOI. You know what I mean? So I'm saying that it is true what you say. I agree with you. But now there's some statements that are outside of what you said that I just don't agree with. Okay. One of the statements I disagree with is that if you know that there's a man that loves this person, and people look at this person as a prophet of God, you know what I mean? And they're thinking that they're working for the prophet of God, they would do anything to you, brother. It is true that the Muslim tried to kill Malcolm, and it is true that the Muslim did kill Malcolm. Because the man said it on television, he's from Jersey. They did kill him. You can't overlook the fact. But you got to take in consideration of this. When you look at the word subliminal seduction, it's suggesting to your subconscious mind. And when you got a group of black men, nothing but black men, and somebody said that the messenger got kids, which he did, and Malcolm wasn't lying. And they say he got kids. And here's a guy coming there, his son or whoever, like the brother said, I ain't gonna mention no name, and got all these men and said, you know what, brother, here's a man talking about the man of God. Something need to be done to him. Don't you know that there's niggas, excuse me, that there's some brothers that come from the street with a savage mentality. Just came from a savage mentality. And they said, this man, what did he say? Something needs to be done? Now, you got to remember that there's a group of people who just came out of the dead world, who still believe in guns and knives. And they're going to say to themselves, hey man, let's get this nigga. Not saying that is the brother right or wrong now, but now here's somebody from the high echelon who don't want Malcolm to get in power. Who don't want Malcolm to get in power, so they're going to try to push him down. And then they send some people to all of the mosques, on fruit night. Send an echelon, like the brother said, and say, man, somebody need to do something to him. That man need his tongue cut out. And don't you know, when you just came from out of the ground, and here you was a killer before you heard the messenger, and now you say, man, here's the guys talking about my Savior or whatever Elijah Muhammad be, then you going to get him.
Is that the nation or 10% bloodsuckers within the nation?
No, I'm talking about, I said, you didn't listen to the statement. I said, the worst person in the world is a religious fanatic.
That's right.
So there's got to be somebody in the world that think he's working for God, who thinking that I got to do this for God. You can't slander my God. I'm not talking about a hustler or a pimp on the side of the mosque or the FBI. They will get somebody to do it. They won't do it. But a person that believes in working for God don't need nobody. He's going to get some guys like him. And then they're going to get together and going to do something.
All right. Let me just say something about this. Two things. One, regardless of what people believe about the white man, this doesn't happen to the white man. Did you know that? Okay. Second is this. Even though you said Malcolm is put down because he says roosters come home to chicken comes home to roost. Chickens come home to roost. You know that was just a political move to do, Malcolm, because, you know, Kennedy ain't our president. The Muslims taught us if Kennedy wasn't our president, Kennedy was the devil. So you can't just one day get up and say, he's not the devil anymore, he's our president. You understand there's a political thing going on in there. And that's what you have to deal with. It's a political struggle going on there. And even though, first of all, let me just say this again. I have respect for Muhammad, I have respect for Malcolm. The reality, however, is that they are political personages and they are caught up in a political struggle over succession to Muhammad. That's the way I interpret it. Muhammad is, even though the Muslims like to think that Muhammad is alert and taking care of every business going on, the reality is that Muhammad was ill for a long time. And that the lieutenants mainly managed the nation, especially John Ali and Raymond Sharif. And they saw Malcolm as a challenge to them and what they were doing. Wallace said this. I'm just saying with Wallace. That's why the first thing Wallace did when he took over was disband the fruit. See, he didn't even want no comeback. First thing he did was to disband them because he saw that as a threat to building a moral community. So I understand what was going on, and what people have to do is get outside talking about the names and ask, in a similar situation, without Muhammad and Malcolm involved, their names, what would you stand for? What would you stand for? Do you think it's right if you in my organization and you get out, should I let you go out? You see, I mean, don't even talk about the nation. Talk about an organization set up. How many of y'all raise your hand would say, if you're in an organization, you shouldn't be able to get out? And if you say something about me, that I should respond in a very negative and ultimate way. You see, you got to talk about that, and you got to talk about it outside the nation and Malcolm, because this is a hot and heated discussion, and a lot of time more heat than light is provided in this. You know what I mean? So I just think, you know, it's sad that this had to happen. You know what I mean? It's a tragic thing. And what is even more tragic, not even more, but what is also tragic, is that people feel the need to struggle that way all over again. That's what this is about, you know. That's sad. That's what I find problematic. Yes, Jean?
I just want to
This
thank
is
you.
the last one?
I think so. I just want to thank you for the lifting up Malcolm X as a spiritual leader, because he was seen as manly, where to many of our people, Christ is seen as effeminate. Now, so his moral growth would be something that we could use to still and again inspire those in the prisons or on the corners or whatnot to make some kind of, as you say, clean up and stand up. The other thing is that I think is important that there is an effort being made in the United States today to remove the white Christ images. So it's regrettable to try to tear down Malcolm at this time when we so badly need leaders that we can look up to. Particularly now, church leaders are being shown to have clay feet and so on. And I think this is an extremely important
And there's no need to try
point.
to tear down now. What's the purpose then? What good can it bring about? It can't bring any good. I mean, it's a futile and nihilistic project. It's just not necessary. Let's end on a good note. I think that if we ought to learn anything from Malcolm's life, it is, as he said, that we're all morally committed to wake up, to clean up, and then stand up. Stand up for what is right. And never has there been a clear case for your need to stand up for right, as in the discussion we just had now. This is an important discussion, and how you approach it would dictate what kind of strength, internal strength, and moral commitment you have. Again, the question is, what is the principle involved? What is the principle? Whether it's Malcolm and Muhammad, or whether it's you and your wife, or you and your brother, or you and your sister, the question is, what is the principle involved? And if you start from principle, you always end with principle. But if you start anywhere else, power, all that other kind of conversation people talk, you can't do anything but end up wrong and picnicking each other, and the only people can benefit from that is the oppressor. Let us wake up, stand up, let us wake up, clean up, and stand up, and build the moral community we want to live in. Black people, stop explaining the way wrong. Stop trying to nickname the truth. Be true, do justice, walk in the way of righteousness, and we have the freedom we want. Thank you.
One more time, Dr. Maulana Karenga. And we have to say a really Asante Sana for Dr. Karenga, because he's been with us all day and all night. You know, we really appreciate that, all the time that he's spent with us.
Can we do the Harambe? Yes, sir. We close our meeting the way we always do, by saying 7 Harambe. Harambe is a Swahili word that means, let's all pull together. And we've been saying that for 27 years in the history of us organizations. It's a call to unity, or call to common struggle. And we say Harambe 7 times for the 7 principles we see as a moral minimum set of values that black people need in order to rescue and reconstruct their history and humanity and shape them in their own image and interest. These 7 principles, these in Nguzo Saba, we see as a moral minimum set of values that black people need in order to rescue and reconstruct their history and humanity, shape them in their own image and interest. We believe that black people could practice just some of these principles, some of the time. A whole new change will come to their life. And those principles, first in Swahili and then in English, said loudly, first in Swahili and then in English are Umoja, Kuchi Chakalia, self-determination, Kuchima, collective work responsibility, Ujamaa, Nia, Umba, creativity, Iman, faith in ourselves, black people, faith in our Creator, faith in our mothers, our fathers, our sisters, our brothers, our grandmothers and grandfathers, our children, our future, faith in all that makes us beautiful and strong, and faith in the righteousness and victory of our cause, faith that through hard work, long
So just want to mention that if you're hungry, there's still some